We will begin with two experts who will discuss their research on cell phone bans, including a case study of a school district in Virginia. We will then pivot to two young people who will debate the merits of cell phone bans at school. So please welcome Dr. David Marshall, Associate Professor of Educational Research in the Department of Educational Foundations, Leadership, and Technology at Auburn University. Dr. Marshall began his career as a middle and high school teacher. Dr. Timothy Pressley, Associate Professor of Psychology at Christopher Newport University. Dr. Marshall and Dr. Pressley collaborated on two studies regarding cell phone usage at schools. Nicholas Torres, a recent high school graduate from Houston, Texas, and KaiTamsin Bwor, a senior at Grenada Hills Charter School in Southern California. Ms. Bwor is the editor-in-chief of her school's student newspaper, so a fellow journalist. All right, so let's begin with Dr. Pressley, who will discuss the findings of a study he and Dr. Marshall released this January titled Banning Smartphones in Schools. We will send a link to the study with our follow-up collateral. Welcome, Dr. Pressley.
Thank you for having us. So Dr. Marshall and I put together a literature review of the studies that have been done looking at the impact of cell phone bans. We looked at studies that have gone across the world. There are still very limited studies that have been done on this topic. So our knowledge on the impact is still growing, and we still need a lot more research. As mentioned, there are different types of bans. The most prevalent one being bell-to-bell bans, which is often going to produce the strongest um, ability to reduce distractions in school. But there are other types of bans that we've seen in schools, including instructional bans, which ban cell phones just during class time, but allow for students to have them at lunch or in the hallway between classes. Targeted restrictions, which are similar to instructional bans, that ban cell phones in certain contexts, such as testing, recess, or specific classes. And we've seen states enact flexible models in which schools and local school districts can select which one of these implementation plans are best for their schools. So when it comes to the overall impact, we looked at three different areas: academics, mental health, and behavior and engagement within the classroom. When it comes to academic outcomes, research generally suggests that the phone bans can improve academic performance. This is the strongest evidence is has seen academic gains for lower achieving and disadvantaged students once the cell phone ban is in place. It is important to note not all the studies found academic improvement in the first year, as a study in Florida did not see any improvement the first year, but during the second year of implementation saw an increase in academic achievement of their students. When it comes to mental health, the evidence is much more mixed. One study in Australia found a decrease in bullying, but did not find any difference in anxiety or depression. We've also seen studies done in the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Spain, which have found limited to no difference in anxiety or depression. So it's very hard to draw any conclusions about the mental health benefits, and one of those may be due to the differences in implementation. We don't see schools implementing it the same way. And students are still on cell phones outside of school. So they're still being impacted by their mental health outside of the school on their cell phones. Another positive uh, finding we found was with behavior and engagement of students. Schools and teachers often found fewer classrooms disruptions and improved student focus and engagement within the classroom. We also have found studies that saw improved student interaction with a study done in New York City where they saw a increase of about 50% in after school activities and sporting events where students were wanting to show up and support their peers that were now interacting with much more frequently. Though there have been some advantages, uh, implementing these policies have come also with some concerns from parents, students, and teachers. One of the main concerns that parents have voiced is their ability to get in contact with their students, especially during emergency situations, whether that a school is going on lockdown or a natural disaster. They are worried that they're not able to contact their students in those crises. Parents also worry about being able to communicate just daily chores, such as how is the student going to get home, such as transportation, or this parent now needs the older student to pick up a younger sibling. When it comes to student concerns, we actually saw one study found that mental health actually got worse because students had a separation anxiety from their phone. So that kind of goes back to why we might need cell phone bans, as students are so reliant on their cell phones that they saw an increase in their anxiety when it was taken away. Students also have concerns about the fairness of the implementation, of the consistency of the implementation across classes, and they feel that sometimes the punishments are not always fair for breaking the rules or not always enforced. From the teacher standpoint, the only concern that we were able to come across is some teachers want to use cell phones or need to use cell phones for certain academic activities. If a certain website is blocked by the school district or the internet at school is not working, they've had students take out their phones to complete the activity. And so they are concerned that they're an avenue that they have used in the past for activities would be taken away. Finally, in our paper, we provided some recommendations for policymakers and local school leaders. For some of these, it, we suggested that they need to happen prior to the implementation and even the development of the school bans, such as including community members from students, parents, teachers, and administrators about what would be the best policy for them as they're going to be the ones impacted the most. Policymakers also need to state a clear rationale for the ban, whether the goal is academic focus, behavior focus, social interaction, or mental health focused. Once they have decided that, school leaders need to make sure that they're providing support to teachers. This includes training on how to implement, routines that should be implemented, communication scripts to send to parents and to provide to students so that they're getting a consistent message, and also support from their school administrators. The other implementation aspects that we recommend are during the implementation, schools and school leaders need to be very explicit about the rules. When Note when the exceptions are, when can students use their phones, and what are the consequences if there is confusion, oh, if they break the rule, and be able to answer questions about possible confusion or loopholes. And then the last thing is schools need to commit to consistent enforcement across classrooms and the school. So this is going to take buy-in from all teachers in order to enforce the policy fairly across all environments. So that is kind of the summary of what we found based off of the previous literature that has been completed on this topic.
Sorry, I had a problem unmuting. Dr. Pressley, thank you so much. I have there are a number of questions for you, but I'm going to start out with the first question. What about cell phones at schools in the era of AI? Does having a phone available encourage students to cheat, or would you equate this to the old days of open book exams, for example?
So there's no research on that specific topic, but I believe that the bell-to-bell bans would probably be the most effective because we're taking that resource of possible cheating out of their hands. Um, but yes, cell phones give us a very easy access to these AI platforms. Many of them have apps that we can put on our phone. We don't even have to go to the website. And thus, I think a cell phone ban, especially if it's a bell to bell, can strengthen the chance of students not cheating in that format. Now, does it reduce cheating altogether? Probably not. Students are creative, but it may take that element out of the hands of students of possible cheating in that way.
Absolutely. So let's go to questions from reporters. Our first question comes from Henrietta Burrows. Henrietta, please ask your question.
Thanks so much, Sunita. Um, One might think that as soon as you take away a cell phone from a student, there might be an immediate increase in focus and concentration. So, how do you explain that there was no academic improvement found during the first year of the ban?
So that was in one study in Florida. Other studies done in Europe did find some increase in academics during the first year. For the Florida study, the possibilities are there could be several. One might just be it took students longer to get used to the ban and for the implementation to actually go have an effect on students. Um, so it may have just been the phone ban wasn't enforced as much the first year, so the students were still kind of getting away with things until the second year when it was more strongly implemented, and students kind of knew what the expectations were.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Jorge Luis Macias. Jorge, welcome and please ask your question.
All right, thank you. How are you doing, sir? Basically, I have two questions, and the first one is that many parents here in the Los Angeles Unified School District, they want their children to have their phones for emergency situations, or to coordinate logistics for carpooling. So, what do you think it is the best approach? To well, in regard to these concerns of safety and security of the students, and the other one is that some students with special needs or specific health conditions might rely on their phones for monitoring or learning assistance. How do you think that the districts could balance the safety and security for these students?
So for the first question about safety and security of all students, especially during a crisis of some sort, or even just coordinating logistics, parents need to go back to trusting the school and seeing the school leaders and teachers as the professionals that they are. We've prior to cell phones, uh, these messages were able to be shared with students by calling the school and having that message shared with them from the office. And so that would probably be the main way that parents can know that they're still getting their logistics shared with the student. Also, a lot of school divisions have text alerts now. And so parents, if there was an emergency of some sort, parents should be getting a text alert about that situation. And we've also seen that the parents actually trying to call the students during those emergency situations actually can inhibit the responses from police and firefighters um, because of their jamming the network, or even the phones are going off when the building should be on lockdown. When it comes to special needs, those situations should be placed into their individual education plans as accommodations and modifications for those specific students. We had those exact same questions, but we believe that schools would be able to put those specific accommodations into an individual education plan, so those students would still be able to use their cell phone for helping them learn.
Thank you.
Thank
Elena
you.
Kuzitsnova. Oh, I'm sorry. Jose, did you still have an additional question? Or hey? Okay, Elena
No,
Kuzitsnova has the
Jorge?
next.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, Elena Kuzitsnova has the next question. Elena, please ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunita. So I have like a dual question. So first of all, do you think it's really possible to restrain kids from their phones, considering that they were born in social media and everything in the phone era? And what do you think can be healthy balance between excessive use of the phone and necessary use of the phone? Thank you.
So to fully restrain, we did hear, and David will talk more about this, of students are going to figure out how to get their phones, uh, whether that's going to the bathroom during class or something like that. Some schools have implemented these pouches called Yoder pouches, where the students' phones are actually locked into these pouches. Teachers often don't even have a key to these pouches. And students are only able to unlock at the end of the day. So that's how some schools have taken it into their own hands to make sure students really don't have opportunities to even pull out their phone. Um, do I think there's a healthy balance? Yes, I think it's important that we are teaching students to self-regulate their behaviors, as they're going to have to learn when it's not appropriate to pull out their phone in a real world setting. Um, and it's also important for students to learn how to use this technology. So I think we do need to find a balance. Um, I I don't know what that balance is at the moment because we don't really have the research quite yet, but I think that is something that needs to be explored in the future.
Dr. Pressley, thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. David Marshall, who will discuss a case study on cell phone bans in a school district in Virginia. Dr. Marshall started his career as a middle and high school teacher and can also provide some perspectives from the ground. Welcome, Dr. Marshall.
Yes, welcome. Thanks so much for having both of us. We're excited to be able to share at least a few things we think we've learned as part of our efforts so far. So you know, the crux of the issue here is that people are distracted by their phones. Surveys work has found that 95% of teachers, 95% of students rather, have access to a smartphone, teenagers at least, and the majority admit that they use it more than they would like to. And so there's an issue here. I think one of the things that we find in schools is when we try to solve a problem that not everyone agrees is a problem, we don't get the results that we have. I'll get to our case study here and how that was not the case there. As Tim provided an overview, you have sort of the targeted restrictions, you have instructional time only restrictions, and you have the bell-to-bell restrictions that you have alluded to. And our case study here is looking at a single school district in the state of Virginia, where in the summer of 2024, the governor signed an executive order mandating that school districts all come up with their own plans for constructing a bell-to-bell ban of cell phones, and that would go into effect on January 1st of 2025. Well, this presented Tim and I a unique opportunity to sort of get ahead of a policy issue. And so we spent the fall of 2024 partnering with a school district and discussing how we might go about studying the effectiveness of this policy. They were all going to have to do it. Each district had to come up with what that looked like. In the school district that we did, they didn't have pouches. They didn't have. I've also seen where in some schools they collect cell phones during maybe an advisory period at the beginning of the school day and give them back at the end of the school day. This school district didn't do either of those things, so students could physically have a cell phone on their person. It just had to be off and away from bell to bell. So to a question that was asked earlier, that solves some logistics issues, because after the school bell ends, the school day, that student could walk outside, pick up the phone, and call their parent or coordinate whatever they needed to do in terms of logistics. That's what this one district decided to do. So we decided that there's a lot of attention focused on students, and I think that's appropriately so. That's the reason for schools. That's the reason for these policies. But Tim and I, a lot of our work focuses on what it looks like through the lens of a teacher. And both of us are former teachers ourselves, and we know that teachers are going to be the frontline individuals for implementing any policy in a classroom. So we kind of thought, all right, other folks are going to cover the basis of understanding how this sort of manifests and how this works with students. What does it mean for outcomes? Mental health, academic, behavioral, otherwise. We wanted to know how teachers were experiencing this. So I think that's one thing that differentiates our case study and our studies. So we partnered with a school district in Virginia. We can't name the school district because of an agreement we had with our institutional review board and the district. But I would say it's a small to medium-sized suburban school district in Virginia. And I described their ban, and we wanted to really know, like, how were teachers experiencing it? So what did teachers think before this ban went into effect? And so we did a round of surveys. We invited every teacher, we invited each of the middle and high schools in the school district to participate. There were 9 schools, 8 agreed to participate. And we then went to each of those 8 schools and invited every teacher to complete a survey for us about 4 to 6 weeks before the implementation of the policy. Since the policy went into effect January 1st of 2025, it was after the winter break that the policy went into effect in the full force. So the first thing we did is, like I said, we surveyed teachers. And, as I started with, I think a lot of times where I see policies not work in schools is where sometimes the teachers may be a little doubtful that the problem is as severe as someone thinks it is, and they're implementing there's another thing on their plate for something that they don't perceive as a problem. Here, that was not the case. 84% of teachers we surveyed supported the ban and the policy in their schools, and 76% said they saw phones as a serious distraction in their classroom. So here we did have a situation where everyone was on the same page and recognizing that this was indeed an issue that needed some sort of resolution. And they all seemed to be on the same page in terms of supporting the direction that they were going as a school district. When we did our survey beforehand, the things they told us that they might be concerned with is if there wasn't substantial administrative backing of their enforcing this policy, or maybe students or parents might have pushed back on the policy, and these were things that they raised. So the policy went into effect, and then if you fast forward to just before testing, so this was early April of 2025, so the policy had been into effect for 3 full months. We wanted to make sure we did it before testing and not after. And we wanted to just sort of check in and see how teachers were experiencing this three months into its implementation. And what we found is that teachers reported there were less distractions, and we asked teachers on a scale before implementation and after, and there was a statistically significant difference. They reported fewer distractions in their classroom. Maybe the most interesting thing is we had a scale that measured a teacher's perceived workload, and their perceived workload was less 3 months into the implementation of this. And we did a post survey, like I said, in April, but we also did focus groups with teachers as well to sort of unpack their findings and to try to understand what was behind some of the numbers we were getting in the survey. And it was not that the teachers had anything actually taken off of their plates, but they were spending less time with the distractions in the classroom. And they also said they observed more peer interactions, that the lunchrooms were louder, there was more conversing even in the hallways, even after school. So there seemed to be some social growth and social development that has sort of occurred here. The one sort of disappointing or maybe concerning finding that we had was that we also had a scale that measured colleague support, and that decreased from before implementation to after. And when we did our focus groups with teachers, it seemed that there were a few instances where the teachers reported that they knew their colleague down the hall. So they knew that Mrs. Smith was still letting students have their phones the last 5 or 10 minutes of class. And the uneven enforcement in some of the schools led to some teachers not feeling as if they were as supported by their colleagues. So, basically one of the takeaways here is going to be the implementation matters and consistency matters here. But teachers did continue to say they supported the policy. 78% said that they supported how the policy was playing out in their schools 3 months into its implementation. And, in terms of challenges, they said they did get some initial student resistance. As I shared, the inconsistent enforcement that was the case with some of their colleagues. The one thing I have to say in the district with whom we partnered, there seemed to be universal administrative support in every one of the schools, teachers from every one of the 8 schools participating, and both in survey responses and in focus groups shared that they had very consistent support from their administrators. So that seemed to make a very big difference. And I think that was one of the things that was driving the high levels of support that we had from them. But our takeaway is just to sort of put a bow on this is that the policy seems to have worked in this district, at least in terms of achieving some of its early goals. Of course, again, in our 3-month time horizon, we didn't have enough to dig into academics or some other things that we might also be interested in. But at least some of the immediate things that seem to work, but with consistent enforcement, leadership matters. And if you're going to enact something as drastic as this, because as it was alluded to, just phones are something that everyone's used to. Even as adults, I know that I reach for my phone, quite often, maybe more than I should during a day. But leadership matters. And then I think timing and communication matters as well. So.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. We have several questions for you in the chat. Let's begin with Ankita Kumar. Ankita, please ask your question.
Thank you, Sunita. Hi, so my question is about how do we protect young teenage girls and non-binary children as well from predatory behavior that arises from, say, taking photos and videos on cell phones?
Well, I mean, I think that in terms of a cell phone policy, I think that having a bell-to-bell ban where you don't have cell phones visible and out in the open in schools would help with that, because it wouldn't, if that was actually being consistently enforced and everyone was adhering to the policy, then you wouldn't have phones available to take photos that could then be used in exploitative manners, I should say.
Next question is from Nestor Fantini. Nestor, please ask your question. Nestor, are you still there?
Yeah, I was trying
Yeah.
to unmute. Yeah.
All right, super.
Thank you, Sunita. Dr. Marshall, as a former K through 12 teacher, do you think that banning cell phones will meaningfully address the core challenges in K through 12 education? In other words, I'm talking of an outdated curricula, low test scores, overcrowded classrooms, disruptive behavior, underpaid teachers, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, if you're asking if I believe that cell phones are a panacea that's going to solve everything, no, I do not. I do think that cell phone bans, at least in the temporary, at least for the time being, could have the potential to improve student engagement, improve focus, and improve even some of the social skills, which I'm glad Tim hit on. And he alluded to the one study we found in New York where they found that even extracurricular activities after school. So they had a bell-to-bell ban, but after the bell rang and students could engage with their phones, they were still choosing to engage socially with their peers in schools and extracurricular activities. And even I think high school sports attendance increased 50% in that study as well. So students were making choices to be social with one another even after the ban was not in effect in those particular instances. So I think that, no, I don't believe this is going to raise teacher pay or solve everything that is ailing schools. I do believe, based on evidence, that, and I'm willing to change my mind if I'm presented with additional evidence, but based on the evidence that Tim and I have reviewed, and based on what we found in our study in this one school district in Virginia, I do believe there are some things that are at least improved as a result of this.
Thank you. Rebecca Bartis has a question. Rebecca.
Thank you. Many workforces today are increasingly digitized and require the use of online tools for many jobs. So how can schools still prepare students for this tech-driven future while implementing phone restrictions? And can they still effectively teach responsible technology use as well as digital literacy skills?
Well, thank you, Rebecca. That's an excellent question. And I think it's one of the sort of key tensions that exists here, where on the one hand, we're saying, well, we think that banning cell phones in schools could lead to improved outcomes. On the other hand, we're having conversations about how to integrate artificial intelligence and to what extent and which ways to integrate that and to teach students the responsible use of AI and teach the students responsible use of technology, because there's still, especially since the pandemic, most schools and most school districts are one-to-one, which means that they have the computer or tablet device for every student in the school, and students are engaging with those. So, there is a tension between messaging. So on the one hand, you could see people say, well, they're saying that technology is bad. And on the other hand, we're saying, well, hold on, we need to use technology for this world that we're all going to enter, which is going to be, digital and AI based and all of the rest. So I do think that's a challenge. I think that the phones provide a unique sort of challenge in that they give people constant access to social media networks. I fortunately or unfortunately, I'm old enough that I grew up personally going to K-12 schools before cell phones were ubiquitous. And I can say I remember being a teenager and the real world was enough to try to navigate. And nowadays that students have to navigate what's going on social media on top of what's going on in the physical spaces of their schools. And so, I mean, these are real challenges. And I don't know that banning cell phones is going to solve everything, but I do know there was one study I'll briefly share. There was a school leader in Gary, Indiana, a charter school. They had initially just banned cell phones during instructional time in their school, and they found that they were still having to deal with some of the online drama during the school day because schools in the hallway between classes during lunch and even going to the bathroom were engaging with social media, and those issues were sometimes bubbling over into the real world or into the hallways. It wasn't until they instituted the bell-to-bell ban during the school day that a lot of that went away. So again, not a panacea. I do think that we need to figure out and wrestle with this idea, this tension of how we're going to prepare students for a AI-driven, tech-driven world, but also deal with the immediate issues that do arise when you have cell phones ubiquitous throughout the learning day.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Dr. Pressley and Dr. Marshall, there are a number of questions for each of you in the chat. And if you could please address them there, that would be terrific. We now move to KaiTamsin Bwor, a senior at Grenada Hills Charter School in Southern California. I'm going to ask Kai 3 questions, and then we will take questions from reporters after both students speak. We have another student as well, Nicholas Torres from Houston. So Kai, in our pre-brief, hi Kai, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Kai. In our pre-brief, you said you were addicted to your phone. Could you please talk about that and maybe explain why?
I think I'm so addicted to my phone. I mean, I wake up and I check that little screen of mine because I think in a way it rewards my brain and like flushes me with a sense of dopamine. And, I come from a home where my parents are a little strict. So since, crime rates have gone up over the past few years, a lot of kids like myself can relate with that. And our phones and, a sense of technology are our only senses of social connection. And that's how in COVID and even now I maintain my structure of communicating with my peers. Even if I have a school project with other teammates, I have to use technology. I have to lie back on it to communicate with them. And I think it's so addicting just because a lot of social media forums are curated to reward you to use their app. So I know, for instance, TikTok or Instagram have different algorithms, and as you scroll, it tends to reward you with content that is more tied to what you like. And I think that is so addicting just because, addiction isn't only defined by drug use, it's defined by things that you do on a constant daily with repetitive behavior to something that you know is negative, but you keep doing it. So for me, addiction to my phone, it causes, obviously, my eyesight has gotten a lot worse. And also, I have this greater reliance on my cell phone. So as I'm not allowed to go outside as opposed to my parents, where when they grew up, they weren't surrounded by cell phones, so they could just walk over to their friend's house a couple miles away, and play something down the street. But parents these days, including my own, are a little more stricter on that, and it's completely understandable. To which, because crime rates have soared, my parents are scared of kidnappings, and they want to know where I am at all the time. So they'll send me a text message, they'll check my location, and I don't blame them. I would do the same. So kids are addicted to their phone just because of that social connection and that reliance, just because we grew up with it. And our parents too are addicted to, checking where we are, which is not a bad thing. I'm not framing all parents as like negative. I completely get it. But I think those two kind of lean back on each other. We look up to our parents as central models in our lives, and our parents look back to us about our daily habits. So it goes hand in hand.
And Kaylee, the young woman in the YouTube Meta case that said that the apps had contributed to her body dysmorphia and that she felt that she had to look a certain way and a certain size. Have the apps impacted the way you and your friends think about your bodies?
I think apps have definitely shaped how I view my body, how I view my looks, you know. In social media, there's always an idealized standard for a lot of women, especially where we see like different types of actresses and influencers online. But I think the cultural influence behind it extends well beyond like what we know, including beauty. So I would argue that social media doesn't create these standards from nothing, but I think it, in a way, amplifies it through like different algorithms, like I said before, that kind of reward these conventionally attractive figures. So as a result, these like platforms that I see online can intensify my insecurities and contribute to issues like body dysmorphia, like Kaylee experienced. But I do think that it doesn't cause like social media does not play play a role in causing it, but rather amplifying it, just because we have so many set standards around, I'm going to go back to a research paper I wrote, but it was mainly about like Eurocentric frameworks and globalization contributing to how we view body types. So, in the Eurocentric world, we view lean figures, light skin, as very conventionally attractive. Whereas other cultures, I know that in my Southeast Asian culture, curvy figures and tan skin are actually looked upon. And I think it's important to appreciate your culture while also keeping in mind that this already established framework of conventionally attractiveness is online. So yeah.
Thank you. And let me ask you a final question, and then I'll segue Nicholas in. Reporters, ask your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Kai, having said what you've just laid out, would you support a ban on cell phones in schools, or are you against it?
I would be devil's advocate and I would say I'm against it, just because I know I take AP psychology, so props to the professors, but I would definitely say to encourage someone to change their behavior, I think being overly strict with this type of authoritarian style, or like completely taking something away like a phone isn't effective. I'm sure many of you guys may be parents in the chat, so you may know the quote, strict parents can create sneaky kids. So I think instead it's better to allow the use with like clear limits established and different expectations. So I know a lot of my teachers in classrooms that I get along with more on a personal level, they allow you to have your phone out to listen to music. If you ask them for permission to go on a different website on your phone that you can't necessarily access on your computer, it's way more convenient. And I feel like this greater sense of trust established between them. But they explain the consequences and, give us some freedom. So we can, like students as a whole, can learn to manage like our behavior and make more responsible choices on our own. And while taking away phones, like these phone bans and bell-to-bell schedules provide benefits, I would argue that it's short term, just because bans never lead to an effective cause. Kids will find a way to be sneaky. And, I see my peers using their phones during quizzes on, essay write-ups. And I think these improved outcomes begin to fade over time if we use bell-to-bell schedules, if we enact bans. So we must learn to sort of adapt to the teaching of responsible use. While I can't define that yet, I would say that we should have access to phones, but with certain limitations, consequences explained. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nicholas, let's bring you in here. Are you supportive of cell phone bans in schools?
No, I'm fully against the phone ban. And
Yeah, tell me
yeah,
why.
why? Because but in the essay I wrote, I feel like we need our phones as students in school for many reasons, and because during class time we use them as tools to help us for like the lecture. The sometimes the teacher would tell us go to this website or use this app, and for our assignments, and usually all the assignments are online. There's, it's rarely on paper. We barely use the pencil. And then also, it's also another reason why I'm against it is because uh, I'd rather have my phone on me than have it taken away. Because in sense of emergencies, we use it to communicate. And yeah, I think those are the main reasons why.
Okay.
Hmm.
Nicholas, in our pre-brief, you mentioned that boys use their cell phones more for games rather than
Yeah.
social media, and they
Yes.
make their friends while gaming. Could you talk about this a little bit?
Yes, of course. I was one of those boys that would be on their phone during the class, and just if if I was already done with my schoolwork, or if I just felt like being rebellious, I would be on my phone playing games, and it would just either be by myself or with my friends. And honestly, I feel like us guys, us males in school, we we don't have so much social interactions like in person, or through social media apps. So we just stick to playing games.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There have been numerous studies on male loneliness and isolation. Do you believe cell phones contribute to or alleviate isolation?
Um, I would say both. I guess they alleviate, and they don't help. When it comes to loneliness, sometimes like the phone is our best friend, and then we get to like there's always YouTube, and we get to watch movies, use other apps on the phone, and also it helps us in ways where we get to connect where with our friends, and we get to text with them, with our peers, and we have group chats, and talk. We send TikToks to each other, reels on Instagram, stuff like that.
While you're in the classroom?
In classroom, yeah, mostly.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting to know. All right. So you're
Hmm.
spending your time in the classroom engaging with your peers.
Mostly, yes.
Okay, that's so interesting. Kai, your response to that is that also your experience? Do you and your peers also spend a lot of time in the classroom communicating with your friends rather than listening to your instructor?
I definitely think Nicholas has a different take on it or stance just because, he argued that males tend to kind of not bond as well as females in society. So in my school is very strict with phone use. We aren't allowed to have them in our pockets even because if they see the outline, if a security guard sees an outline of your phone in your pocket, they will ask to take it away. So it must be shut off and placed in your backpack. And the reason I'm against a phone ban is just because I've seen firsthand on how students sneak around that policy. So I will see students kind of using their phone by their hip underneath a desk, or being very secretive about it. But I I I would definitely say that as a woman, it's in school with my friends, it's easy to interact just because we have that phone ban intact. But also teachers, like I said before, that promote um not necessarily promote, but allow its usage with the consequences and benefits in mind, tend to have more interactive classrooms. So they're more talkative, they're more engaging. Especially in my AP psychology class, my teacher looks down upon it, but he doesn't take it away, and he instead informs you of its consequences. So, hey, like if you use this for homework, this will be detrimental to your grade. Like you must use this to learn for the upcoming exam. It's not going to help you if you use AI. So I think that AI or phone bans necessarily depend. I think they depend more on the classroom environment and how your school structure works. And yeah.
Yeah. Nicholas, I'd like to ask one final question before we go to reporters. You experienced a cell phone ban in your senior year, in your last year of high school. How did that impact that last year for you?
To be honest, for my senior year,
Yeah.
my school, it wasn't really that strict when it came to the phone ban. Um, it kind of felt like the bell to bell thing, but there would be times where in class I would have there would be other students that would be on their phone, and some teachers really don't care unless if you get your work done, or even if there was other students that wouldn't get their work done and the teachers wouldn't like pay attention, or they wouldn't mind the students at all. They wouldn't waste their time or effort trying to convince them like um to do their work. And um for me, it it really didn't affect me because for my classes, they would always the school gave us a school laptop, so I would always sometimes we wouldn't do like me and my friends. Sometimes we would get on the laptop to just play games after, yeah, and then
Interesting.
and then
During
mostly
classroom time.
yeah, during classroom time we would just play
Okay.
games, and then we would just listen to music as well using my phone.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Tariq Khan has a question for let's ask it of Kai. Tariq, please go ahead and ask your question.
Unmute. Okay, my question is, how can a school or teachers can have a balanced policies where the teachers can get undivided attention from the student, but a student must have a regulated permission or partial permission of use of phone and put it away during the class and use it when they need it in case of emergency, like to contact parents, to contact their siblings, things like that. That this control, it's put it away, but it's available also. Is that a possible or no?
Kai, do you want to take that question?
Sure. I'm going to go back to my AP Psych class because I love my teacher very much and how he's implemented the policies. So I know that for exams or assessments, we have a lockdown browser established on our computer. So we aren't allowed to leave our tab or leave our test, which I think should be, widespread. I think that should be implemented. But in terms of during lectures or classwork, he tends to walk around class. He's a very engaging teacher, and I think that encourages us to put our cell phones away just because he has such a humorous energy that he brings to the environment of our classroom. So a lot of kids tend to put their phone away because he'll be saying kind of answers on a test in a very blatant way, and we're encouraged to listen and we're encouraged to put our phones away just because, one, he frowns upon it, but two, it's going to be on our assessment that counts towards our grade. So our teacher, by communicating with us effectively and bringing this cheerful energy to class and being very interactive with the students, kind of talking to each student one-on-one or talking to the class as a whole, makes it a really good environment to just want to put yourself away. It's not necessarily someone imposing that restriction on you, but you rather want to do it yourself. So I find myself not even knowing when the lunch bell rings just because I'm so like caught up in his lectures and how he tends to interact with students one-on-one. So while there isn't an effective way established yet, like Mr. Khan said, I think I can argue effective environment creates cheerful students and less phone use.
That's fantastic. Irene Diaz-Bazan has a question. Nicholas, why don't you take her question? Irene, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you. I have a question. Does restricting phone use in school actually change student habits, or does it just move screen time elsewhere?
Yeah, Nicholas?
Um, I think restricting the phone use and the phone time, maybe I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's okay.
I think sorry, can I hear the question again?
So I think Irene was asking, all right, you take your phone away in the
Mm-hmm.
school, does it
Mm-hmm.
just move elsewhere? Kids are spending 4 to 6 hours on their phones. Does that mean that you're staying up later at night?
Oh, okay. Yes,
That's
that's another good point. Did you have something? No? Okay. So, I believe that many students, if they stay up late using their phones, and but at the same time, if they put their phones away during school time, I think they they use their phone more at home, and I feel like I feel like you should spend more quality time with your family instead of being on the phone and just like locked in your room. And that's how I feel, me personally. But I think even if there's even students that even if they use their phone in school, I'm pretty sure once they go home, they still use their phone.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, thank you. Let's leave reporters with your 30-second soundbite. Dr. Marshall, I know you're still on. Could you leave us with your most important takeaway from this call?
Sure, and I just want to say, but first, I appreciate Nicholas and Kai sharing your perspectives as well. It's always good to hear. Even if we were looking at teachers, it's always good to hear from students how they're perceiving these policies. What I want to leave you with is just basically at least what the evidence that Tim and I have looked at so far, what the research shows is that bell-to-bell cell phone bans can work. They can create classrooms where students are more focused, classrooms that run more smoothly, teachers spending less time competing with distraction, but implementation matters. And if teachers are left to enforce these policies on their own, they can break down. So schools that have clear expectations and strong support from administrators and colleagues, I think that's where you're really going to see the benefits.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marshall. Nicholas, your most important remark?
My most important remark is honestly, I would say that just to leave your phone maybe in your backpack or in your pocket and just pay attention in class. Also, to spend quality time with your family and friends. Pay attention to the teacher. Make sure you pass your classes and graduate. And, there's always so much time throughout the day that the phone can wait, your friends can wait as well. The games can wait, stuff like that. And, and like Dr. Marshall said, the bell to bell thing that um like you have y- there's little time in classes, and it's better to wait at the end of class, and you get those 5 minutes or 10 minutes, however long, and then during lunch you can use your phone or spend time with friends and socialize, and yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nicholas. And Kai, final word to you.
I would say you can't encourage better behavior just by being completely strict or taking away things entirely, such as cutting off phone use. I think that just leads to resistance, especially from a student standpoint. I believe a more effective approach is to allow the phone use, but with clear limits and guidance established. So I think teachers, faculty, members, and even students ourselves can explain the consequences and give us that freedom, but we have to learn the responsible choices on our own while still feeling supported in a sense. And I would also argue cell phones only amplify our habits and different set standards in media. Cell phones don't create them from scratch.